Title: The American Mindset: 10 Rules for Winning in Life Today. The city of Boston never really slept. Even at 5 a.m., when most of America was still buried under blankets and dreams, the streets near the financial district already carried the faint pulse of ambition. Coffee shops were lighting up one by one. Taxis were already arguing with traffic lights, and the first trains of the morning were pulling in like clockwork, carrying people who believed that today mattered more than yesterday. Among them was a young man named Ethan Carter. Ethan was 27, living in a small apartment in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Nothing about his life looked extraordinary on the surface. A modest job at a logistics company, a second-hand laptop, a bookshelf filled with books he promised himself he would finish someday. But inside his mind, something was shifting. He had recently gone through a painful breakup, lost a promotion he thought was guaranteed, and watched two of his closest friends move out of the city for better opportunities. For a while, he felt stuck, as if life had quietly moved forward without him, until one morning, everything changed. That morning, Ethan met someone who would alter the way he saw success, discipline, and life itself. Her name was Margaret Collins, a retired business strategist in her late 60s, living in a quiet neighborhood near Beacon Hill. She wasn't famous, she wasn't on social media, but she had spent 40 years studying one thing: why some people rise while others remain stuck. And she believed it came down to mindset, not luck, not background, not even talent, just mindset. They met by coincidence at a local bookstore cafe. Ethan was sitting alone, scrolling through job listings with tired eyes, when Margaret noticed him. Not because he looked special, but because he looked lost in a very familiar way. She sat across from him without asking permission. "You look like someone waiting for life to start," she said calmly. Ethan almost laughed. "It already started. I think I just missed my part." Margaret smiled. "Life doesn't miss people. People miss themselves." That sentence stayed with him longer than he expected. Over the next few weeks, they met regularly. Coffee turned into conversations. Conversations turned into lessons. And slowly, Margaret began sharing what she called the 10 rules of the American mindset for winning in life today. She told Ethan that these weren't theories. They were patterns she had seen in entrepreneurs, leaders, builders, and even ordinary people who ended up living extraordinary lives. And Ethan, desperate for direction, listened carefully. Rule 1. Take full responsibility for everything. One evening, sitting near the Charles River as the sun reflected off the water, Margaret said, "You stop growing the moment you blame anything outside yourself." Ethan frowned. "But some things really aren't in my control." "True," she replied. "But your response always is." That was the first rule. The American mindset, she explained, begins with radical responsibility. Not blaming the economy, not blaming family, not blaming timing, not blaming bosses or circumstances, because blaming creates paralysis. Responsibility creates movement. Ethan realized how often he had blamed everything around him: the company, the city, the market, even his past. That night, he wrote in his notebook, "If I own the problem, I own the solution." Rule 2. Move before you feel ready. A week later, Margaret gave him a task. "Apply for a position you think you're not qualified for," she said. Ethan laughed nervously. That sounds like a rejection waiting to happen. Good, she replied. Then you're doing it correctly. She explained that in America's most successful environments, readiness is often an illusion. People wait for confidence before action, but confidence is built through action. You don't feel ready and then start, she said. You start, and then you become ready. Ethan applied for a project coordinator role at a larger firm in downtown Boston. He didn't think he would get it, but he did something more important. He stopped waiting. Rule 3. Discipline beats motivation. Every time. Winter arrived in Boston with sharp winds and gray skies. Ethan struggled to wake up early. His old habits tried to pull him back. One morning, he canceled their meeting. Margaret called him immediately. Did motivation leave you? She asked. I just didn't feel it today, he admitted. There was a pause. Ethan, she said firmly, motivation is a visitor. Discipline is a resident. That became Rule 3. She explained that successful Americans don't rely on feeling inspired. They rely on systems. They show up when it's boring, when it's cold, when it's inconvenient. Because life rewards consistency more than intensity. Ethan started waking up at 5:30 a.m., not because he wanted to, but because he decided to. Rule 4. Think in decades, not days. One evening, they walked through Harvard Square. Students rushed past them, stressed about exams, internships, deadlines. Ethan said, Everyone looks like they're running out of time. Margaret nodded. That's because they are thinking in days. She stopped walking. The American mindset thinks in decades. She explained that short-term thinking creates panic. Long-term thinking creates patience. Most people quit too early because they expect immediate results. But success, she said, is compounding. Ethan began to shift his thinking. Instead of asking, what can I achieve this week? He started asking, who can I become in 10 years? That question changed everything. Rule 5. Learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Margaret took Ethan to a boxing gym in South Boston. He was confused. I don't box. You do now, she said. Inside the gym, the noise was overwhelming. Gloves hitting bags, trainers shouting, sweat in the air. Ethan struggled through basic training. He got tired quickly. He wanted to stop. Good, Margaret said. Stay there. He gasped. Why would I stay when I'm struggling? Because growth lives there, she replied. Rule 5 was simple but brutal. Comfort is the enemy of progress. She explained that most Americans who succeed learn to embrace discomfort early, physically, mentally, emotionally, because the ability to stay calm under pressure becomes an advantage in every area of life. Ethan left the gym exhausted, but different. Rule 6. Your network shapes your future. One night, Margaret invited Ethan to a small networking event in downtown Boston. The room was filled with entrepreneurs, designers, engineers, and investors. Conversations flowed like electricity. Ethan stood awkwardly in the corner. Margaret joined him. Tell me what you see. I see people who belong here, he said. And you don't? He hesitated. Not yet. She smiled. Then change who you spend time with. Rule 6 was about environment. You don't rise to your goals, she said. You fall to your environment. Ethan began slowly distancing himself from people who drained his energy and leaning toward those who challenged him. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Rule 7. Master one skill before chasing many. Ethan had always jumped between interests: marketing, design, coding, business ideas. Margaret noticed this. One afternoon, she placed a notepad in front of him. "Pick one skill," she said. "That's it?" "That's everything." She explained that American success stories often begin with depth, not variety. Mastery creates leverage. If you become average at 10 things, she said, you remain invisible. If you become exceptional at one, you become valuable. Ethan chose logistics optimization, something related to his current job, but deeper and more technical. For the first time, he stopped scattering his energy. Rule 8. Learn financial awareness early. Margaret handed Ethan a stack of papers one day. "Your paycheck is not your wealth," she said. He looked confused. She explained budgeting, investing, saving, and most importantly, understanding how money works. "Most people work for money their entire life," she said. "The American mindset teaches money to work for you." Ethan began tracking every expense, studying financial systems, and reading late into the night. It wasn't exciting, but it was powerful, because for the first time, he wasn't just earning money, he was understanding it. Rule 9. Failure is data, not identity. A few months later, Ethan finally got his new job offer. But within the first 6 weeks, he made a major mistake at work. A miscalculation in logistics planning caused delays and cost the company thousands. He expected to be fired. Instead, his manager said, "Fix it, learn from it." That night, Ethan felt crushed. He called Margaret. "I failed," he said. "No," she replied, "you collected data." Rule 9 changed his perspective on failure completely. She explained that in America's most competitive environments, failure is not a label, it's feedback. Ethan stopped seeing mistakes as proof of inadequacy. Instead, he saw them as part of learning. And strangely, he started improving faster. Rule 10. Never stop reinventing yourself. 1 year passed. Ethan was no longer the same person who had met Margaret in that bookstore cafe. He had changed jobs, increased his income, built discipline, and developed clarity about his future. But Margaret's final lesson came during their last walk together near the Boston Harbor. "You've grown," she said. "I still feel like I'm beginning," he replied. She nodded. "Good. That means you're still alive in progress." Rule 10 was the most important. Never stop reinventing yourself. Because success is not a destination, it is continuous evolution. "The moment you think you've arrived," she said, "you begin to decline." Ethan understood. Life wasn't about becoming someone once. It was about becoming someone repeatedly. Final scene. Months later, Ethan stood in his own small office overlooking downtown Boston. The same city that once made him feel small now felt like a place full of possibility. He kept Margaret's notebook on his desk. On the first page were the 10 rules. He read them often, not because he forgot them, but because he needed reminders. One afternoon, he visited Beacon Hill to thank her, but she had moved away quietly. No forwarding address, no farewell message, only a note left behind in her usual cafe spot. It read, "Don't look for me. Look for the life you build from what you learned." Ethan smiled. because now he understood. She was never the source of change. She was the mirror, and everything she taught him had already become his own mindset. The American mindset is not about where you start. It is about how you think, act, and evolve every single day. These 10 rules are not shortcuts, but principles built through discipline, responsibility, and growth. Apply them consistently, and life begins to shift in ways you never imagined. Thank you for watching this story. Good luck in your journey, and remember, stay consistent, stay focused, and never stop growing. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to stay on this channel and subscribe for more powerful, life-changing stories like this. Continuation. The American Mindset. What happened after the 10 rules? After Margaret's disappearance, Ethan thought the story had ended. But in reality, it had only just begun. For the first time in his life, he was no longer being guided step by step. There were no more weekly lessons, no calm voice correcting his thinking, no one to challenge his excuses, just silence and responsibility. At first, that silence felt heavy. Then it became powerful because Ethan slowly realized something Margaret had been trying to teach him all along. The real mentor was never a person, it was discipline itself. Phase 1. The first real test. 3 months after Margaret left, Ethan's company went through restructuring. Departments were merged, roles were changed, and uncertainty spread across the office like wildfire. People panicked. Some started quietly applying for new jobs. Others complained daily. A few stopped trying altogether. But Ethan did something different. He remembered Rule 1, take full responsibility. So instead of waiting, he started mapping inefficiencies in the company's logistics system during his own time. Late nights, empty office floors, flickering fluorescent lights. He stayed behind when others left. One evening, his manager, Daniel Harper, noticed him still working at 9:45 p.m. "You don't have to do all that," Daniel said. Ethan replied without looking up. "I know. That's why I'm doing it." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Ethan paused. Because a year ago, he would have said, "Because I want recognition." But now, he said something different. "Because I don't want to be replaceable." That answer changed everything. Phase 2. The idea that almost failed. Ethan began developing a new internal system, an optimized logistics tracking model that reduced delays and improved delivery accuracy. It was ambitious. Too ambitious. When he first presented it, the room went quiet. A senior analyst laughed. "This is too complicated for our current infrastructure." Another said, "We've tried improvements before. They don't scale." Even Daniel looked uncertain. "Ethan," he said carefully, "this could either help us or create more problems." That night, Ethan almost gave up. He sat alone near the Charles River again, staring at the water, thinking about everything he had learned from Margaret. Rule 9 echoed in his mind. Failure is data, not identity. So he asked himself a better question. Not what if they're right, but what if I improve it until they are wrong? Phase 3, the discipline period. For the next 6 weeks, Ethan lived differently. No distractions, no social media scrolling, no unnecessary conversations. He woke up at 5 a.m., worked before work, stayed after work, and spent weekends refining the system. Most people didn't notice, but those who did thought he was obsessed. Maybe he was. But in the American mindset Margaret had taught him, obsession wasn't negative. It was direction without friction. He stopped chasing motivation completely. Some mornings he felt nothing at all, and he worked anyway. Some nights he felt exhausted, and he worked anyway. That was Rule 3 in action. Discipline wasn't something he practiced anymore. It was something he became. Phase 4. The Breakthrough. 2 months later, Ethan asked for another presentation. This time, the atmosphere in the room was different. People were curious, but still skeptical. He connected his laptop, took a breath, and began. This system reduces shipment delay prediction errors by 42%, he said. The room stayed silent. He continued, explaining data models, flow structures, cost efficiency improvements, and time optimization. Halfway through, even the skeptics stopped interrupting because the numbers were undeniable. When he finished, Daniel leaned back in his chair. "That's not what I expected," he said. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then Daniel said something that Ethan would never forget. "We're going to test it." That was it. Not approval, not celebration, just a chance. But in Ethan's world, a chance was everything. Phase 5. The collapse that almost followed. Success never arrives cleanly. The first trial of Ethan's system failed in a small regional hub outside Boston. A data sync error caused confusion in delivery routing. Packages were misallocated, customer complaints increased, and suddenly everything Ethan had built was questioned again. "This is exactly what we warned about," someone said in a meeting. Ethan stayed quiet, but inside, doubt started creeping in. That night, he walked again, but not to the river this time. He walked without direction. For the first time since meeting Margaret, he thought, maybe I'm not built for this level. And then he stopped walking, because he remembered Rule 9 again, but deeper this time. Failure is not just data. It is pressure-revealing structure. He realized something important. The system didn't fail because the idea was wrong. It failed because he rushed scaling without stress testing edge cases. So instead of defending himself, he rebuilt it from scratch. Phase 6. The shift in identity. Over the next 3 months, something subtle changed in Ethan. He was no longer trying to improve. He was now the person who improves systems. People in the office started noticing, not because he spoke more, but because when he did speak, it mattered. Daniel began involving him in strategic meetings. Senior leadership started asking for his input. One day, a colleague asked him, "How do you stay so consistent?" Ethan thought about it, then answered honestly, "I stopped deciding based on how I feel." That sentence spread quietly through the office. Because most people were still trying to win life emotionally, Ethan had shifted to winning structurally. Phase 7. The unexpected invitation. One morning, Ethan received an email from an unfamiliar address. Subject line: Beacon Hill Library, Saturday, 10 a.m. No signature, but he knew instantly. Margaret. His hands froze for a moment. After months of silence, she had returned. Not physically, but intentionally. He went. Phase 8. The final lesson. The library was quiet. Old wooden shelves, soft sunlight through tall windows, the smell of aged paper. And there she was, sitting exactly like before, as if no time had passed. "You built something," she said without greeting. Ethan sat down slowly. "I tried." She smiled. "No, you became someone who builds. There was a pause. Then Ethan asked, "Why did you leave?" Margaret looked at him calmly. "Because most people don't need teachers," she said. "They need pressure, and then they need silence." He nodded slowly. Then she added something unexpected. "You've completed the rules." Ethan frowned. "So what now?" Margaret leaned back slightly. "Now you break them." Phase 9, the real meaning of success. Ethan didn't understand at first. "Break them?" She explained. "The rules were never the destination. They were the foundation. If you stay inside them forever, you become disciplined, but not free." She continued. "The final stage is creation, not following systems, not improving systems, but designing your own." That moment changed Ethan more than anything before, because he realized something important. Everything he had learned wasn't about success. It was about transformation. Phase 10, the beginning of Ethan's own path. 6 months later, Ethan left his job, not because he was tired, but because he was ready. He founded a small logistics optimization startup in Boston, focusing on intelligent supply chain systems for small businesses. It started small, very small, just him, a rented office space, and one client who believed in him. But for the first time, Ethan wasn't following rules given by someone else. He was applying principles through his own vision. And strangely, he no longer feared failure, because now he understood. Failure was not the opposite of success. It was the raw material of it. Final reflection. One evening, Ethan stood on a rooftop overlooking Boston. The city looked the same as it always had, but he didn't. He thought about Margaret, not as a mentor, not as a guide, but as a catalyst. She had never given him success. She had given him something far more valuable, a way of thinking that could not be taken away. The wind moved softly across the skyline, and Ethan finally understood the truth behind the American mindset. It was never about being the best in the world. It was about becoming someone who continuously evolves with the world. Closing note. If you are watching this story, remember this. The rules are not magic. They are choices. And every day you are either repeating your old identity or building a new one. The American mindset is not geography. It is discipline, responsibility, and constant reinvention. Thank you for staying till the end of this story. Good luck in your journey. And don't forget, stay connected with this channel and subscribe for more powerful motivational stories that can change the way you think, act, and live.